president and CEO of an organization I founded 40 years ago. Half of the organization is focused in on reclaiming human lives through the application of arts training, ceramics, photography, digital imaging. The other half of my life is vocational education, where I'm taking poor people, people who have been disaffected, left behind, reclaiming those people, providing market-specific training, and getting them into the workforce in substantial numbers. So it's both arts education for at-risk kids, it's adult education for unemployed adults, and we've created several social enterprises out of the effort, one of which is a 40,000 square foot horticultural facility where we grow orchids for the retail and wholesale market. We've created some real estate that's generating revenue in the community where we're located, and we've created an award-winning jazz record label that's now won 4 Grammys. So we've spun that off as an enterprise associated with the facility as well. It's a philosophy that is focused on excellence, doing the right thing, having aesthetically pleasing environments that are well equipped with market-specific faculty that become a part of the attitude and the culture that we believe in. I have a story. It's about a young man named Sharif Bey, who started with my program when he was 13 years old in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, African-American kid, pretty disaffected in terms of how he had planned to live out his life, was not performing well academically. We recruited him into our arts program. He got pretty good at clay. He got so good, in fact, at clay, he graduated from high school, won a 4-year scholarship to an undergraduate school, graduated with honors. Then he won a Fulbright scholarship, graduated with honors, and just recently received his PhD in education and ceramics, which effectively makes him a part of a very rare community of leaders, particularly those who have come from circumstances like his own. I was giving a talk at a luncheon in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, recently, and Sharif Bey was asked to introduce me. So he gets up in front of 400 people and basically says, Bill Strickland is the reason I'm standing here at this podium. Because of his work in the Manchester Craftsmen's Guild and the importance of the things that it opened up for me, I am now Dr. Sharif Bey, Associate Professor of a college here in Winston-Salem. He said, I've been very anxious and nervous to do this presentation, but it was my one and only chance, probably publicly, where I could recognize the extraordinary belief system that Bill and Manchester Craftsmen's Guild has created for me. I then got up to the podium and I said, I don't have to give the speech. You just heard the speech.
If y'all ever heard of a guy named Frank Lloyd Wright, he did pretty good in the architecture business. And Mr. Ross took a bunch of us high school kids to see a very famous house that Frank Lloyd Wright built called Falling Water, just south of Pittsburgh. So here's the image. Here's this Italian art teacher with these black kids in his van. We go down through the woods, and there's this fabulous house sitting up on a boulder with a creek running right down through the middle of the place. And I looked at that, and I said, in my neighborhood, we spend time trying to keep the water out of the house. These guys got a creek running right down through the middle of the place. That's an interesting way of looking at water. The other thing that really fascinated me was the quality of the light that enveloped the house. And I said, if I can get that light into my neighborhood, I'm halfway home. So I committed myself to building a Frank Lloyd Wright building before I left the planet, and I'm going to show it to you because it did. That's the building. It's in the worst neighborhood in Pittsburgh with the highest crime rate, which is exactly where it needed to be built. If you guys ever come to Pittsburgh, and you're all invited, you'll fly into Greater Pittsburgh International Airport. My building was the scale model for the Pittsburgh Airport. So it's very famous. It has a fountain in the courtyard, as you can see. The reason it has a fountain is I always wanted a fountain, and I had the checkbook, so I bought one and put it there. But the concept was, I'm working with all the poor folks, the black people and the welfare mothers and the ex-steel workers. Remember them? Pittsburgh used to make steel. Well, they're really struggling. And the theory is that if you want to work with people who have been left behind by life, you have to look like the solution and not the problem. Wow. So when the welfare mothers and the steel workers come to my center, that's the first thing they see when they walk in the building, because I'm in the attitude business, not just the training business. And people are a function of environment. You build world-class environments, people act like world-class citizens. You build prisons, they act like prisoners. And now that I'm giving speeches all over the place, I got put on the board of the Carnegie Museum. They have millions and a fountain in their courtyard because they think that the people that go to the museum deserve a fountain. Well, I think the welfare mothers and the steel workers deserve a fountain too, and that's why I put in my school. When I was out there at the Silicon Valley, I met another guy, came out of the audience. This kid said, man, what a presentation. I said, thanks, man. What do you do for a living? He said, well, I built a company called eBay. I said, oh, that's cool. You got a card. Remember, I ain't the techie guy. I didn't know what eBay was, man. So I stuck the guy's card in my pocket. I went back to Pittsburgh and asked one of the little techie kids. I said, what is eBay? I said, holy smokes, I met the guy that built the company. So I called him up and I said, Mr. Skull, I've come to have a much deeper appreciation of who you are, man. And he laughed. He said, I thought you'd figure it out sooner or later. Early on to something, here's $500,000. I said, what's that for? He says, your first replication. And against all probability, Jeff Skull and I have become very close friends. He's got $5 billion. He's 40 years old. He's a good guy. And I was sitting in his mansion in Palo Alto one night, and I said, Jeff, what do you need me for, man? You got $5 billion. You're 40 years old. What do you need with a black guy from Pittsburgh for with one program? He said, during your whole presentation, there was only one word in my mind. I said, what was that? He said, scalable. I think you're scalable just like eBay. So he gave me a pile of money. We hired a couple of guys from the Harvard Business School, wrote a business plan, and created a division called the National Center for Arts and Technology. And we're starting to build centers, man. A Pennsylvania State cop, a white guy, with tears in his eyes, saying, I can't go to another funeral, man. These are two white police officers talking to a black guy about saving poor people. As God and you are my witness, I'm telling you what I saw yesterday. I'm doing this because I want to change the place. I want to change the planet. I want to do it with you guys. The other reason I'm doing this work is I make this work look easy. That's my job. I make the impossible possible. That's the name of the book, by the way, Making the Impossible Possible. My mother, before she died, unfortunately left me with a gene that prevents me from blocking out images of suffering. I don't know how to do that. So at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm watching CNN, and I'm seeing the black kids in Africa with the flies in their mouth, and I can't go back to sleep. And the kids eating out of the garbage dumps in San Paulo, or the people standing under the bridges in Atlanta when I come in the cab at night. And I'm troubled, and it hurts, and I don't like it. And I want to do something about it. I don't want to live like this anymore. I need you guys to be a part of this thing. And the personal reason I do this work that I make look so easy is difficult, and it's depressing because of all the suffering. But I figured out the cure for the depression. If you make friends in every town where you go, the next time you won't be so lonely, and therefore you won't be so suppressed. And I'm hoping that I made a couple of friends here today. And thank you for listening to what I had to say. The fundamental principle that I would also like to embellish the concept of making the impossible possible is your faith. When you don't have tangible evidence that your theories and your strategy is bearing dividends because you've elected to work with the most impossible of circumstances, you have to look inside yourself for your guiding principles, your belief system, and that oftentimes will carry you through the darkness into a brighter day.
A piece of advice for those of you who are interested in going into the field of social enterprise is don't do it by yourself. This is a profession that can be very isolating, can be very difficult, can be very challenging, particularly because it's a young field. The oldest practitioners are probably have been within the last 30 years. So we've yet to develop a worldwide base. There's yet to be developed a worldwide interlocking system of friendships and professional opportunities to have your work from time to time validated. So in my view, it's very important that you cluster yourself, surround yourself with individuals of like mind, of like energy, and that you take advantage of those opportunities to, from time to time, test out your ideas and test out the quality of your life. Because if you get consumed by the very thing that you're attempting to change, you have not done this generation, much less the future generation, any good. So being very thoughtful about how you protect the quality of your life, your mental health, your physical being, I believe is fundamental to being an effective social entrepreneur. Thank you.